Indy, and today I'll be sharing with you what I found out about Scottish culture and the influence it had on my great-granddad Angus Black's life. I'll be focusing particularly on the leadership of the Presbyterian Church in the Scottish education system. I'll begin this presentation with the adventures of Angus Black, the fun-loving, fantastic man that he was. He was born and raised in New Zealand, his parents a pair of fiery Scottish immigrants from Inverness. His parents were devout Scottish Presbyterians, and so this was a large part of Angus's life from the time he was young, and carried on throughout the majority of his life until he transitioned into more of a pacifist. But before he embarked on his journey of transcendental meditation, the Presbyterian Church values were the ones that influenced him the most. Great-granddad was a very smart man and a wonderful artist, and because of these talents he decided that he wanted to become an architect. However, architecture school was in Auckland, and unfortunately Grandad resided on the opposite end of New Zealand in Dunedin. Despite the lack of planes and trains during this time, Grandad was not disheartened, for he had his push bike, and before he knew it he found himself pedalling on up to Auckland, at times stopping over in bus shelters and pool house changing rooms for the night. When he got tired of biking, he would travel along the coastline, trying his luck at hitching a ride on a ship, swapping his dishwashing and potato peeling skills for a ride. After graduating as an architect, Grandad took part in the Second World War as an engineer, building bridges for the troops to cross and then blowing them up so the enemies couldn't follow them across. Upon his return, Grandad married Gran and had 3 children. His interest in nature and his community grew, and over the rest of his life he became a member of the Yellow-Eyed Penguin Trust, the Alpine Club, and a life member of the Peninsula Trust. He contributed a lot to all of these organisations. One of these contributions was the designing and assisting in the building of the hut on the Mount Aspiring track. Grandad shared his passion of art and nature with the whole family, my earliest memories of him being colouring in books with pastel crayons and walks in Ross Creek. He was an inspiration to a lot of people in my family with his determination to do what he thought was right or necessary, his never-ending ability to have fun, his love of his family, and his outlook on life in general. Now we'll get to some aspects of the Scottish culture and look at how these have influenced Grandad's life. In the beginning, the Scots were led predominantly by a clergy. In leadership terms, you would call this a theocracy, where the legal system is based on religious law upheld by officials who are deemed divinely guided. In Scotland, the clergy believed that the only real authority for God's will on earth was the Bible, and therefore everyone must learn to read and understand the Bible. This ability was not only meant for men but for women too, something that was very rare during this time period, and shows that it was not an overbearingly masculine society. This can relate to Hofstede's theories around masculinity versus femininity, as he describes societies with low masculinity as relationship-oriented, with an emphasis on people's quality of life as well as the protection of the environment being a high priority, which are all traits of the Scottish culture. Along with the individualistic values of self-improvement, there is a long-established belief in Scotland in service to the community, the belief that human beings have an overriding responsibility to one another. This is something that stands out clearly from Grandad's contribution to a number of community groups as well as his intense love for nature and his family. A lot of these urges will have come from the religious leadership his family would have been brought up with and passed on to him. These ideals of working to help other people also relate to the emphasis the clergy put onto attributes that they believed showed good character, as this was an integral part of godliness. Schools were instructed to educate their pupils on cleanliness, industry, honesty, and unselfishness. These characteristics that they were being taught can be related to the attributes of moral leadership, which emphasizes ideas around making the world a better place, treating people well, caring for the environment, with a particular focus on religious beliefs. Another form of leadership seen within the Scottish culture was transformational leadership. Transformational leadership is the idea that through the strength of their vision and personality, leaders are able to inspire followers to change expectations, perceptions, and motivations to work towards a common goal. These leaders were philosophers such as Thomas Hobbes, Robert Burns, Adam Smith, and Sir Walter Scott, who appeared during the time of the Enlightenment. This intellectual movement sought to understand the natural world and the human mind. This movement occurred just after the Jacobites lost the war against England, and there was an attempt to assimilate the Highlanders through the banning of speaking Gaelic, wearing traditional tartan attire, and the chiefs had their rights to jurisdiction removed. At a time of defeat, there was a number of people emerging within Scotland, working together to benefit the individual and society as a whole, so it is no surprise that they were looked upon as leaders and role models, and are still celebrated for their achievements today. By the time 1707 came around, bringing with it the Treaty of Union, Scotland had already developed a national education system, the only one in Europe outside of Scandinavia, and having the ability to keep Scotland's own laws and regulations around this was one of the conditions of the treaty. Having this system set them apart from the rest of the world, and is something that they would have been proud of. Grandad's determination to study architecture and his joy of learning constantly throughout his life, combined with the education of his entire family despite financial barriers, shows that this pride in education was instilled in the future generations from the values of the Scottish leaders. A leader can be defined as someone who rules, guides, or inspires others, and that is exactly what Great-Grandad was to our family. He has influenced a lot of beliefs my family holds, and importance in particular the environment, creativity, and love of family and the world in general. He was a leader to us just as his family were leaders to him, and the Presbyterian Church and Scottish cultural influence lead them and their ancestors. Oops, almost 7 minutes.
Good job.